Right now, on a dark ocean somewhere, a town of 5,000 people is sailing through the night. It has streets, a hospital, a post office, its own zip code, and almost everyone aboard is asleep. Tonight, let this floating city carry you off too. Before we continue, just wanted to let you know that we have heard your feedback and we're now on Spotify. Go through the link in the description to join us there for a rich listening experience. Picture it out there in the darkness. A single vast shape moving slowly across the open sea, far from any land, with the black water stretching away in every direction and the stars turning overhead. From a distance, it looks like an island, low and long and solid. But it is not an island. It is a ship, the largest kind of ship humans have ever built. And inside it, tonight, thousands of people are living an entire life at sea. We call these ships aircraft carriers, and the word hardly does them justice. An aircraft carrier is not really a boat in the way we usually imagine one. It is closer to a small city that happens to float. A modern one carries around 5,000 people, sometimes more, and everything those 5,000 people need to live for months at a time, all sealed inside a single enormous hull and carried across the loneliest stretches of the world's oceans. Think for a moment about what it takes to keep 5,000 people alive and well, day after day, hundreds of miles from the nearest shore. They need food and fresh water and beds to sleep in. They need doctors when they fall ill and dentists when a tooth aches. They need somewhere to wash their clothes, somewhere to cut their hair, somewhere to buy toothpaste and snacks and postcards. They need mail from home and a quiet place to pray, and somewhere to exercise, and somewhere simply to sit and talk. A town on land provides all of these things through hundreds of separate shops and offices spread across many streets. An aircraft carrier provides every single one of them inside itself, stacked in layer upon layer of decks below the surface. And so, remarkably, these ships really do contain nearly everything a small town contains. There is a hospital aboard, with operating rooms and hospital beds and medical staff ready day and night. There is a dentist. There is a post office. And because the ship has so many people and receives so much mail, it is assigned its own postal code, just like any town, so that letters and parcels can find their way across the ocean to the people waiting for them. There is a store where the crew can buy small comforts, a barbershop for haircuts, a gym for exercise, a library of books, and a chapel where quiet services are held. There are laundries washing mountains of clothes, and workshops fixing whatever breaks. Everything a community of thousands could need, folded neatly into a single moving vessel. The streets of this town are narrow steel passageways, running the length and breadth of the ship, threading past countless doorways and ladders that lead up and down between the decks. A newcomer can become hopelessly lost in them at first, wandering the identical grey corridors like a stranger in an unfamiliar city, slowly learning the way home to their own small corner. In time, though, those passageways become as familiar as the streets of any hometown, and the ship stops feeling like a machine and starts feeling like a place. A place where you live and eat and sleep, surrounded by the people who have become, for these long months, your entire world. Because that is the strange and rather beautiful truth of it. For the people aboard, this floating city is not an adventure or an idea. It is simply home. They wake in it, work in it, share their meals in it, and lie down to sleep in it, all while it carries them silently across water, so deep and so far from land that it is difficult to imagine. Above them, the sky, below them, miles of dark ocean, and all around them, the warm, humming, crowded life of a town that floats. Over the course of this long, quiet night, we are going to explore that town together, gently and without any hurry. We will trace how the whole idea began, with one brave pilot and a flimsy wooden platform. We will stand on the enormous deck and feel the scale of the thing. We will look at the tireless heart that powers it, the clever way it makes its own fresh water from the sea, and the daily rhythms of the thousands of lives lived aboard. There will be nothing to remember and nothing to worry about. Simply let the facts arrive softly, one after another, and let them carry your mind out to sea. For now, though, there is nothing you need to do but settle in. Let your body grow heavy and your breathing slow. Somewhere out on the dark and rolling ocean, a whole city of steel is sailing quietly through the night, its thousands of people resting as it goes, rocked gently by the deep. And tonight, as we wander its silent decks together, it is going to carry you towards sleep, as softly and as surely as it carries them. Before there were floating cities, before there were giants of steel, there was one man, one flimsy aircraft, and a wooden platform bolted to the front of a warship. The whole idea of the aircraft carrier began with a single, quietly daring leap. It was the autumn of 1910, only 7 years after the very first powered flight, when aircraft were still fragile things of wood and canvas and wire, barely able to stay in the air at all. A civilian pilot named Eugene Ely agreed to attempt something almost everyone thought was impossible and probably foolish. He would try to fly an aeroplane off a ship. Navy men had begun to wonder whether aircraft might one day be useful at sea, but no one had ever proven that a plane could even leave a vessel. Ely offered to try. They built him a sloping wooden platform over the bow of a cruiser, a short ramp of planks, perhaps 80 feet long, angled slightly down toward the water. His aircraft was a simple Curtiss biplane, an open frame of struts and fabric with the pilot perched in the open air. On a grey November day, with the ship at anchor, Ely climbed aboard, opened the engine, and rolled forward down that short wooden slope with nothing but sea ahead of him. The aircraft ran off the end of the platform and immediately began to fall. It dropped toward the water so steeply that the wheels actually touched the waves, and the propeller flung up a spray of seawater, splintering its tips. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed the whole attempt would end in the sea. But the little engine held, the wings caught the air, and slowly, wetly, the aircraft clawed its way back up into the sky. Ely, half blinded by spray, flew shakily to the nearby shore and landed safely on a beach. It had worked. For the first time in history, an aircraft had flown from a ship. That alone would have been enough to make him remembered. But flying off a ship was only half the problem. An aircraft that can leave a vessel but never return is of little use at sea. The far harder challenge was landing back onto a ship, bringing a moving aircraft down onto a tiny wooden platform and stopping it before it ran off the far end. A few months later, in the early days of 1911, Ely set out to solve that half as well. This time, a platform was built onto the rear of a large ship anchored in a wide bay, a wooden deck perhaps 120 feet long. And here, Ely and his helpers invented, in the simplest possible way, the basic idea that carrier aircraft still rely on today. They stretched a series of ropes across the platform, and to each end of every rope they tied a heavy sandbag. Onto the underside of Ely's aircraft they fixed hooks. The plan was that as he landed and rolled forward, his hooks would catch the ropes one after another, and the weight of all those dragging sandbags would gently but firmly pull the aircraft to a stop before it reached the end. It was a crude system, ropes and sandbags and hooks, held together with little more than nerve and cleverness. And astonishingly, it worked almost perfectly. Ely brought his biplane down out of the sky, settled onto the wooden deck, and his hooks snagged the ropes just as planned. The sandbags lifted and dragged, the aircraft slowed, and it came to a safe and tidy stop with room to spare. He had landed an aeroplane on a ship. Then, after pausing to have lunch aboard the vessel, he calmly took off again and flew back to land, having proven both halves of the impossible in a single morning. Sit with how humble that beginning truly was. The mighty aircraft carriers of today, those 100,000-ton cities of steel, all trace their ancestry back to a wet propeller, a slope of planks, and a row of sandbags tied to ropes. Everything that came after, every giant deck and every clever machine, is really just a refinement of the two simple things Eugene Ely proved on those 2 days: that an aircraft could leave a ship, and that, with something to catch it, an aircraft could come home to one again. There is a gentle kind of reassurance in that, worth holding as you settle deeper. The most enormous and complex things in our world almost always begin as something small and modest and brave. A single person willing to try. A simple idea worked out with rope and sandbags and a wooden ramp. The vast floating cities we began with tonight did not spring into being fully formed. They grew, slowly and patiently, from this one quiet act of daring on a cold morning over the sea, more than 100 years ago. Ely himself could hardly have imagined what he had started. He simply wanted to prove it could be done, and in proving it, he opened the door to everything that followed, to the giants we will spend the rest of this night exploring. In the next chapter, we will watch that small beginning grow, as navies took Ely's idea and, decade by decade, built the very first true aircraft carriers, ships with long flat decks made for aircraft to live upon. Once Eugene Ely had shown the world that aircraft and ships could work together, navies began to take the idea seriously, and the modest wooden platform slowly grew into something far grander. Over the years that followed, the first true aircraft carriers were born. At first, the improvements were cautious. Navies bolted flying-off platforms onto the front of existing warships, much as Ely had used, and launched aircraft from them. But these platforms had an obvious limit. A plane could leave, but it still could not easily return, because the rest of the ship, its masts and funnels and gun turrets, stood in the way of any landing. To truly make a ship into a home for aircraft, something bolder was needed. The ship itself had to be reshaped around the aircraft, rather than the aircraft squeezed onto the ship. The answer, when it came, was the flat top. Instead of a platform tucked onto the bow, engineers imagined an entire, long, flat, unbroken deck running the whole length of the vessel, clear of obstructions, so that aircraft could both take off from one end and land back onto the other. It sounds simple now, but at the time, it meant rethinking a warship from the keel up, stripping away the towering structures that every other ship carried, and leaving instead a clean, open field of deck stretching from bow to stern. The first ship to truly achieve this appeared toward the end of the First World War. In 1918, the British Navy completed a vessel called Argus, built upon the unfinished hull of what had been intended as an ocean liner. Argus had a long, flush flight deck running the entire length of the ship, unbroken by any island or funnel, the smoke from her engines cleverly channeled out through vents to keep the deck clear. For the first time, here was a ship with a genuine full-length flying deck, a real runway at sea, able in principle to both launch and recover aircraft along its open top. The shape we now recognize instantly, the long, flat deck, had been born. A few years later, another milestone followed on the far side of the world. While Argus had been converted from a hull built for other purposes, the Japanese Navy set out to build a ship designed from the very beginning, from the first line on the drawing board, to be an aircraft carrier and nothing else. That ship, called Hosho, was completed in 1922, and it holds the distinction of being the first vessel in the world to be finished as a purpose-built aircraft carrier. It was no longer a warship or a liner adapted to carry aircraft. It was a ship whose entire reason for existing, from its earliest conception, was to be a floating home for flight. From these first true carriers, the idea grew and grew. Navies around the world saw what these ships could do and began building their own, each generation larger and more capable than the last. Decade by decade, the carriers swelled in size. Wooden decks gave way to steel. Small ships carrying a handful of fragile biplanes gave way to larger ones carrying dozens of aircraft. What had begun as a daring experiment became, over the middle years of the 20th century, one of the most important kinds of ship afloat, and the vessels kept growing, patiently, steadily, toward the giants we know today. And that is really the heart of this chapter, a story not of a single sudden invention, but of slow, patient growth. No one sat down and designed the modern supercarrier all at once. It emerged gradually, one careful improvement at a time, across many years and many nations. Someone thought of the flat deck. Someone else thought of building a ship for that purpose alone. Others, later, would add the clever angled deck, the powerful catapults, and all the rest. Each generation looked at what had come before, kept what worked, and improved what did not, and the ships grew steadily better and larger as the decades passed. There is something restful in that kind of patient progress, and it is a good thought to rest your mind upon now. We often imagine that great things arrive in a single flash of genius, but the truth is usually gentler and slower than that. The aircraft carrier was not invented in a day. It was grown, lovingly and carefully, over generations. Each set of engineers, handing their work on to the next, like a torch, passed quietly down the years. From Ely's sandbags, to the flush deck of Argus, to the purpose-built Hosho, and onward through decade after decade of steady refinement, the idea matured toward its full and magnificent form. So picture that long unfolding as you settle further into the quiet. The first flat wooden decks under grey wartime skies, the first ships built for aircraft alone, and then the slow, sure swelling of these vessels across the years, growing larger and stronger and more capable, until at last they became the vast floating cities we began this night aboard. In the next chapter, we will stand at the foot of one of those finished giants and simply take in its scale, the sheer, almost unimaginable size of a modern aircraft carrier, a mountain of steel that somehow floats upon the sea. Let us stand now at the foot of one of these finished giants and simply take in its size, because the scale of a modern aircraft carrier is difficult to hold in the mind, and there is a strange calm in numbers so large. A modern supercarrier stretches around 1,090 feet from bow to stern. That is well over 300 meters, longer than 3 football fields laid end to end, approaching 1/4 of a mile of ship. Imagine standing at one end of it and looking toward the other, and finding the far end so distant that a person standing there would be small and hard to make out. This is not a boat you take in at a glance. It is a structure so long that walking its length is a proper journey, and the crew think nothing of covering a mile or more, simply going about their day, up and down its decks and passageways. And it is not only long, it is deep and tall as well, a floating building many stories high. From the very bottom of the hull, far below the waterline, up to the top of the tower that rises from its deck, a carrier stands as tall as a substantial high-rise. If you could somehow tip one up and stand it on its end in a city, it would rank among the taller buildings there, a skyscraper of grey steel. Inside, its many decks stack one above another like the floors of an office block, connected by countless ladders and stairways, so that moving from the lowest levels to the highest is like climbing 20 floors or more. Then there is its weight. A modern carrier displaces over 100,000 tons. That number is almost meaningless until you try to picture it. So try this. It weighs more than a large land bridge, more than tens of thousands of cars piled together, a mass of steel so enormous that it seems it could not possibly float at all. And yet it does. It sits upon the water, vast and solid, held up by nothing more than the simple fact that its huge hull pushes aside an even greater weight of sea, 100,000 tons of steel, resting as lightly on the ocean as a leaf on a pond. The flight deck on top, where the aircraft live and work, covers around 4.5 acres. Think of that, 4.5 acres of open, flat steel floating out on the ocean. That is a field, a genuine field, larger than many parks, laid out upon the top of a ship. People have played games of catch upon it, jogged laps around its edge, and it still feels spacious, even with aircraft parked across it. An entire farmer's field of deck, riding the swells of the open sea. And here is perhaps the most wonderful part of all. This mountain of steel, this 100,000-ton floating building with a field on its roof, does not simply sit still. It moves, and it moves quickly. A carrier can sail at more than 30 knots, which is faster than most people ever drive a boat, faster than many cars travel through a town. Picture that enormous mass sliding through the water at such a speed, its great bow pushing aside the sea in a wide white wave, the whole vast structure driving forward as smoothly and steadily as if it were weightless. Something so large has no right to move so fast, and yet it does, gliding across the ocean with surprising grace. There is a particular kind of peace that comes from contemplating things this large, and it is worth resting in tonight. When we hold something truly enormous in our minds, our own small worries seem to soften and shrink a little beside it. A ship 1/4 mile long, 100,000 tons of steel afloat, a field riding upon the waves, moving faster than the wind. These are facts so grand that they quiet the busy, chattering part of the mind simply by their size. The way standing before a mountain or gazing up at the stars can hush our thoughts without any effort at all. And unlike a mountain or a star, this giant is warm with life. Every one of those hundreds of feet of length, every one of those stacked decks, is filled with people living and working and resting. The scale is not empty and cold. It is a great sheltering vastness, wrapped around 5,000 human lives, holding them safe in the middle of the endless ocean. The bigness is not lonely. It is protective, like the walls of an enormous house. So let the size of it settle over you now, softly. A structure longer than 3 football fields, taller than a high-rise, heavier than you can truly imagine, with a green field of steel on its back, moving swiftly and smoothly across the dark and rolling sea. So immense that it makes the mind grow quiet, and so full of sheltered life that its vastness feels not frightening, but kind. In the next chapter, we will climb the one tall structure that rises above that great flat deck, the tower called the island, and visit the calm, high perches from which this whole floating world is watched over and guided through the night. Rising from that vast flat deck, off to one side, stands the single tall structure on the whole ship. The crew call it the island, and from its high windows, the entire floating world is watched over and guided. The island is a narrow tower of steel that climbs up from the edge of the flight deck, bristling with radar dishes and antennas and masts. It is placed deliberately to one side, along the right-hand edge of the ship, rather than in the middle, so that the rest of the deck can remain a clear, open field for aircraft. From a distance, it is the one feature that breaks the long, flat line of the carrier, a small cluster of bridges and platforms perched at the deck's edge, like a lighthouse on the shore of a steel island. And in a sense, that is exactly what it is, the one high place on an otherwise level world from which everything else can be seen. Inside that tower are the rooms from which the ship and its aircraft are commanded, stacked one above another as the island rises. Lower down sits the navigation bridge, the place from which the ship itself is steered. Here, tall windows look out over the bow and the sea ahead, and here, the officers and crew responsible for the vessel's course keep their watch, guiding this quarter-mile of steel across the ocean, choosing its heading, minding its speed, watching for weather and for other ships far off on the horizon. It is a calm, focused place, quiet with concentration, where a handful of people hold the safe passage of 5,000 lives in their steady hands. Higher up in the island, above the navigation bridge, is another room with an even more particular purpose, and it is one of the most fascinating places on the whole ship. It is called primary flight control, and the crew shorten that to pri-fly. If the navigation bridge is where the ship is steered, then pre-fly is where the sky around the ship is managed. From its windows, set high enough to look down across the entire flight deck and out at the air beyond, a senior officer oversees every single aircraft that moves on the deck or flies anywhere near the ship. This officer is known, wonderfully, as the air boss. It is an informal name for a very serious job. The air boss, from that high glass perch, is responsible for all the aircraft in the ship's immediate world, every plane taxiing across the deck, every launch, every landing, and every aircraft circling in the sky within several miles of the vessel. Nothing takes off and nothing comes down without passing through the air boss's watchful attention. It is much like the control tower at a busy airport, except that this airport is only a few acres in size, floats upon a moving sea, and has its aircraft launching and landing from the same small strip of deck. The air boss holds all of that in mind at once, keeping every aircraft safely apart, calm and clear-headed amid what looks, from below, like beautiful chaos. There is something deeply reassuring about these high, quiet rooms, and it is a good thing to rest your thoughts upon. All across the great ship, thousands of people are busy at their tasks, or eating, or sleeping, and above them all, in the tower at the deck's edge, a small number of watchful people are always awake and alert, guiding the ship through the water and the aircraft through the air. Through the deepest hours of the night, when almost everyone aboard is resting, the lights of the bridge and of pre-fly still glow, and the watchkeepers there still keep their patient vigil, eyes on the sea and the sky, so that everyone else can rest in safety. Imagine being one of the thousands asleep in the decks below, and knowing that somewhere above you, in that high tower, someone is awake and watching over the whole ship, steering it gently through the dark, minding the weather, keeping the great vessel safe on its course while you sleep. There is a particular comfort in that, the comfort of being watched over, of being able to let go and rest precisely because someone else is holding the watch. It is the same comfort a child feels, knowing a parent is awake in the next room, multiplied across a whole floating city. So picture that tower now, rising from the edge of the deck, its windows glowing softly against the night. Inside, calm and capable people, keeping their quiet watch, guiding the ship and its aircraft through the darkness with steady, practiced care. And all around and below them, the great vessel moving smoothly onward, and thousands of souls resting easily, held safe by those watchful few in the high-lit rooms of the island. You can let yourself rest in that same safety now. Somewhere above the sleeping city, a watch is being kept, patiently and well, and there is nothing you need to hold on to tonight. It is being held for you. In the next chapter, we will go down instead, deep into the heart of the ship, to visit the tireless power that drives this whole giant forward, a heart of such quiet strength that it can push the vessel around the world many times over without ever needing to stop. Deep in the heart of the ship, far below the waterline, lies the source of all its strength. A modern carrier is driven not by burning fuel, but by a pair of nuclear reactors, a heart so tireless it can push the great vessel around the world many times over without ever stopping to refuel. To understand what a gift this is, think first about how an ordinary ship moves. Most vessels burn fuel oil, and they carry only so much of it. As they sail, they steadily empty their tanks, and sooner or later, they must return to port or meet a supply ship to fill up again. Their range, the distance they can travel, is limited by how much fuel they can hold. For a warship that may need to stay far out at sea for a long time, this is a real constraint, a leash of fuel that always, eventually, pulls it home. A nuclear-powered carrier is freed from that leash almost entirely. Instead of burning oil, it carries 2 nuclear reactors, and these work on a completely different principle. Inside a reactor, a small amount of nuclear fuel produces a steady, controlled release of heat, not through fire or flame, but through the quiet physics of the atom itself. That heat is used to boil water into steam, and the steam spins great turbines, and the turbines turn the propeller shafts that drive the ship forward through the sea. It is, in a way, a very old idea, using steam to turn machinery, but the source of the heat is extraordinary, and it changes everything. The most remarkable thing about it is how long the fuel lasts. A tiny quantity of nuclear fuel holds an almost unimaginable amount of energy, far more, pound for pound, than any oil or coal. As a result, these reactors can power the ship for more than 20 years before they need refueling. 20 years. A carrier can be launched, sail the world's oceans through decade after decade, and go all that time without ever once taking on fuel for its engines. The range this gives it is, for all practical purposes, unlimited. It could circle the entire globe, not once, but many times over on a single loading of fuel, and still have plenty to spare. Think about what that means for life aboard. The ship is not tied to port by any need for fuel. It can go wherever it is needed, stay at sea for as long as required, and cross the widest oceans without a thought for how far the nearest fueling stop might be. The only real limits become the human ones: how much food can be stored for the crew, and how long the people themselves can remain at sea before they need to return home. The machine itself could simply keep going, tirelessly, almost forever. The heart never grows weary, and it is a quiet heart too. Deep in those engine spaces, there is no roar of burning fuel, no belching smoke rising from great funnels the way it did on the coal and oil ships of old. The reactors do their work steadily and silently, heat becoming steam, steam becoming motion, in a smooth and continuous flow that never falters. From the reactors comes not only the push that drives the ship forward, but much of the other power the floating city needs as well: the electricity for its countless lights and machines, and the energy to perform other quiet miracles we will come to shortly. This single tireless heart, humming away in the depths, brings the whole vast vessel to life. There is a deep and steadying comfort in the idea of a heart that never tires, and it is a lovely thing to rest upon as the night grows later. Somewhere far below the sleeping crew, below the mess decks and the berthing spaces, and all the busy life of the ship, that quiet power beats on, steady and sure, hour after hour, year after year. It does not rest, and it does not need to, so that everything above it can. It asks for nothing and simply gives, driving the great ship faithfully onward through the endless water, a source of strength so patient and so enduring that it can be relied upon completely. The people asleep aboard rarely think about it. They do not need to. They simply trust, without a second thought, that the heart of their ship is beating steadily beneath them, as it always has and always will for the long life of the vessel, carrying them safely across the sea while they rest. That quiet, tireless faithfulness is woven into the very bones of the ship. So let that steady beating settle you now. Deep in the heart of the great floating city, a tireless power hums on through the darkness, turning the atom's quiet energy into gentle, endless motion. Never faltering, never resting, never needing to, simply carrying the ship and everyone aboard it faithfully onward through the night, as it will carry them onward for years and years to come. In the next chapter, we will see another of the quiet miracles this tireless heart makes possible. For a ship far out at sea, surrounded by nothing but salt water, must somehow find fresh water for thousands of people to drink, and the way it does so is one of the most wonderful things about life aboard. A ship far out at sea faces a strange and ancient problem. It is surrounded on every side by water, endless miles of it in all directions, and yet not a single drop of that water can be drunk. The sea is salt, and salt water cannot quench thirst or cook a meal or wash a body clean. So how does a floating city of 5,000 people find enough fresh water to live? The answer is one of the quiet marvels of the ship, and it flows directly from that tireless heart we visited in the depths. A carrier does not carry all its fresh water with it, for no ship could possibly store enough to supply thousands of people for months at sea. Instead, it makes its own, continuously, drawing it straight out of the salty ocean all around. The ship takes in seawater, and by a clever process, strips the salt away, leaving pure fresh water behind. It performs this small miracle over and over, all day and all night, turning the undrinkable sea into everything the crew needs. The way it does this is beautifully simple at its core. One method is much like the way the sun makes rain. If you heat seawater until it turns to steam, the salt is left behind, because salt does not rise up in the vapor. That steam, now free of salt, can then be cooled back into liquid, and what you collect is clean, fresh, drinkable water. On the ship, the heat to do this comes from the reactors deep below, that same tireless source of energy, boiling seawater and capturing the pure vapor, so that the ocean itself is gently transformed into fresh water. Other systems press seawater through fine filters that let the water pass but hold the salt back. Either way, the result is the same wonder: salt water in, fresh water out. And the quantity is astonishing. A modern carrier can produce around 400,000 gallons of fresh water every single day. 400,000 gallons, conjured from the sea, day after day, without ever running dry. That is enough to fill many swimming pools, enough to meet the enormous daily thirst of a whole town. It has to be, because a floating city needs water for so very many things beyond drinking. There is cooking for thousands, and washing dishes after every meal. There are showers for a weary crew, and laundries washing endless mountains of clothes. There is water needed by the ship's own systems, including the reactors and the steam machinery themselves. All of it, every gallon, drawn from the salt sea and made pure. Think about how completely this frees the ship. Just as the nuclear heart releases it from any need for fuel, this water making releases it from any need to carry or collect fresh water. The ocean, which to a thirsty sailor of old was a cruel and undrinkable desert, becomes for this ship an endless well. Wherever it sails, however far from land, it is floating upon an inexhaustible supply of the very thing it needs most, and it has the means to draw that supply up and make it sweet. The sea is no longer an obstacle to life aboard. It is the source of it. There is something quietly profound in that, and it is a peaceful thought to hold as you rest. Here is a vessel that takes the one thing surrounding it in overwhelming, useless abundance, the salt water of the open ocean, and patiently, endlessly transforms it into exactly what is needed to sustain thousands of lives. Nothing is carried that need not be. nothing runs out. The ship simply reaches down into the sea beneath it and draws up all the fresh water its people could want, as naturally as a tree drawing water up from the soil through its roots. And it does this silently, invisibly, without anyone aboard having to think about it. A sailor turns a tap and clean water flows, and they need never wonder where it came from, or worry that it might one day stop. Deep in the ship, the water-making machinery hums along beside the reactors, quietly performing its miracle around the clock, so that the simple gift of fresh water is always there, always flowing, always enough. The endless sea, made drinkable, made gentle, made kind. So let that image carry you further towards sleep. A great ship far out on the salt ocean, entirely surrounded by water it could not drink, and yet wanting for nothing, because within its steel body it patiently turns that very sea into fresh, clean water, hour after hour, more than enough for every soul aboard. Self-sufficient, self-sustaining, drawing its life directly from the deep. A floating city that has made peace with the ocean and taught the endless salt water to sustain it. There is a lesson in that worth resting on, that even the things which seem most useless or overwhelming can, with patience and cleverness, be turned into exactly what we need. The ship does not fight the sea, nor fear it. It simply, quietly, makes use of it. In the next chapter, we will return to the top of the ship, to that great 4-acre field of steel, and discover how such a small deck was cleverly reshaped so that aircraft could take off and land upon it at the very same time. Let us climb back up now to the great flat top of the ship, that 4.5-acre field of steel, because although it looks simple, it hides one of the cleverest ideas in the whole history of these vessels. The way that deck is shaped solved a problem that once made carrier flying far more dangerous than it needed to be. Here is the difficulty. On land, an airport can be enormous, with runways stretching for 2 miles or more, plenty of room for aircraft to take off at one end while others land at the other, all kept well apart. A carrier has no such luxury. Its entire deck is only a few acres, a tiny fraction of a proper runway, and upon that small space it must somehow both launch aircraft into the sky and catch them as they return. For much of carrier history, this created a genuine and frightening problem, because launching and landing on the same straight strip of deck simply could not be done at the same time. Picture the old arrangement. On the early carriers, the flight deck was one long straight strip running from the back of the ship to the front in a single line. Aircraft would land at the rear of this strip and roll forward to stop. But this meant that any aircraft parked or preparing to launch at the front of the deck sat directly in the path of an incoming plane. If a landing aircraft failed to stop in time, if its hook missed the wires meant to catch it, there was nothing ahead but the parked aircraft, the crews working among them, and disaster. The straight deck forced launching and landing to take turns, and left a terrible danger whenever a landing went wrong. The solution, when it finally came, was so elegant that it seems obvious once you hear it, and yet it took decades to arrive. It was thought up by the British Navy in the early 1950s, and it is called the angled deck. The idea is this: instead of running the landing strip straight down the length of the ship, you angle it off to one side, so that the part of the deck used for landing points away from the bow at a gentle slant, out over the left edge of the ship and the open sea beyond. This one change transforms everything. Now, an aircraft coming in to land is aimed not at the crowded front of the deck, but out toward empty water off the side. The launching area at the bow and any aircraft parked there are safely out of the landing path. And most beautifully of all, it solves the problem of the missed landing. If an aircraft touches down and fails to catch the wires, it no longer faces a deadly wall of parked planes ahead. Instead, Because the angled deck points out over open sea, the pilot can simply push the engines to full power, lift off again from the end of the angled strip, and climb safely back into the sky to come around and try once more. What was once a catastrophe becomes merely a second attempt. And there is a further gift hidden in this clever geometry. Because the landing strip now runs at an angle, separate from the straight path along the bow, the ship can do two things at once. Aircraft can be launched from the forward part of the deck at the very same time that other aircraft are landing on the angled part, the two streams of traffic crossing the deck along different lines, safely apart. The angled deck effectively gave the carrier two runways in the space of one, letting it launch and recover aircraft simultaneously, greatly increasing how much it could do. A single slanted line, drawn across the deck, doubled the ship's abilities and made its most dangerous moments far safer. It is worth pausing on how much good came from so simple an insight, because there is a gentle wisdom in it. The engineers did not add vast new machinery or make the ship enormously bigger. They simply looked at the same deck from a fresh angle, quite literally, and saw that by turning the landing path a few degrees to one side, they could make everything safer and better at once. Sometimes the finest solutions are not about adding more, but about arranging what you already have a little more wisely. A small shift in perspective and a long-standing danger quietly falls away. So the next time you picture that great flat deck riding the waves, see the clever secret written into its shape. The angled landing strip slanting off toward the open sea, keeping the returning aircraft safely apart from those preparing to fly, and offering every landing plane an easy escape back into the sky should it need one. A simple, graceful idea that made a hard and hazardous thing calm and manageable. There is peace in that thought, the peace of a well-solved problem, of danger gently engineered away by a moment of clear thinking. The deck is not merely a field of steel. It is an idea, carefully shaped for safety. In the next chapter, we will look at how an aircraft actually leaves that short deck in the first place, flung into the air by an extraordinary machine that can hurl a heavy jet to flying speed in only a couple of seconds. Now we come to the moment of launch, and to one of the most astonishing machines aboard the entire ship. Because the deck is far too short for a heavy jet to reach flying speed on its own, the carrier does something remarkable. It picks the aircraft up and throws it. Consider the problem first, because it makes the solution all the more impressive. On land, a jet needs a long runway to take off. It rolls forward for thousands of feet, gathering speed little by little, until at last it is moving fast enough for its wings to lift it into the air. A carrier deck offers only a few hundred feet of run before the edge and the open sea. There is simply not enough room for a heavy jet to build up the speed it needs by rolling along under its own power. Left to itself, an aircraft attempting to take off from so short a deck would trundle off the end and fall straight into the water. Something has to give it the speed it cannot gather for itself, and give it almost instantly. That something is called the catapult, and it is essentially a gigantic slingshot built into the deck. Running along the forward part of the flight deck is a long slot, and beneath it, hidden below the surface, lies the powerful machinery of the catapult. When an aircraft is ready to launch, it is carefully positioned over this slot and connected to a small, strong fitting called a shuttle, which sticks up through the slot and grips the front of the aircraft. The shuttle is attached to the catapult's machinery below, and then, on the signal to launch, that machinery fires, dragging the shuttle forward along the slot at tremendous force and hauling the aircraft with it. The result is breathtaking. In about 2 seconds, the catapult flings the aircraft from a complete standstill to well over 150 miles per hour, propelling it down the short deck and off the bow into the air, already moving fast enough to fly. 2 seconds, from perfectly still to faster than any road-going car, in the length of a few hundred feet of deck. The force of it is enormous, pressing the pilot back firmly into the seat, and yet it is precisely controlled, tuned to give each aircraft exactly the speed it needs and no more, so that it leaves the deck flying rather than falling. For most of the history of these ships, the power behind that mighty throw has been steam. The carrier's engines produce steam in great quantities, and that steam is stored under high pressure and then released all at once behind a piston in the catapult, shoving it forward along its track and flinging the aircraft with it. It is the same steam, ultimately, that comes from the ship's tireless heart deep below, put to yet another use, this time to hurl aircraft into the sky. Great clouds of white vapor often drift across the deck after each launch, the visible breath of the steam catapult doing its work. On the very newest carriers, an even more advanced method has begun to replace the steam. Instead of pressurized vapor, these ships use electromagnets, a long line of powerful magnetic coils built into the deck that grip the shuttle with invisible force and accelerate it forward smoothly and precisely. This newer system, driven by electricity rather than steam, can be tuned even more gently and exactly, giving each aircraft a smoother push. Whether by steam or by magnets, though, the essential wonder is the same. The ship takes an aircraft that cannot possibly take off on its own, and in the space of 2 seconds, throws it cleanly into flight. There is something almost gentle hidden inside all that power, and it is worth resting upon. The catapult is tremendously strong enough to hurl many tons of metal to flying speed in an instant. And yet its whole purpose is not destruction, but care. Every ounce of that force is aimed at one tender goal: to lift the aircraft and its pilot safely up into the air, to give them exactly the speed they need to fly, and to send them off the deck, not falling but soaring. All that raw might, precisely measured and gently applied, so that a heavy machine and the person inside it can leave the ship and take to the sky unharmed. So picture that launch now, in the calm of your mind. An aircraft settled quietly onto the deck, connected to the hidden slingshot below. A pause, then a surge of controlled power, a rush of forward motion, a breath of white steam, and the aircraft sweeps down the deck and lifts smoothly away over the bow, climbing into the open sky. 2 seconds of enormous, carefully governed force, and then the soft release into flight. Power and gentleness, together, in a single, graceful motion. There is a quiet beauty in a strength used so carefully, so precisely, always in the service of lifting something safely upward. Let that thought settle over you as you sink deeper toward rest. In the next chapter, we will follow those aircraft home again and see how the ship performs the even harder trick of catching a fast-moving jet out of the sky and bringing it gently to a stop in the space of only a couple of seconds. If launching an aircraft from so short a deck is remarkable, then catching one as it returns is harder still, and it may be the single most demanding thing done anywhere in aviation. The ship must reach up, take hold of a fast-moving jet out of the sky, and bring it to a complete stop in about 2 seconds. Think again about the problem of the short deck, now in reverse. On land, a returning jet touches down and then rolls along the runway for thousands of feet, slowing gradually until it comes gently to rest. A carrier deck offers no such room. A jet landing on those few hundred feet of angled deck is moving at around 150 miles an hour when its wheels touch, and if nothing stopped it, it would race straight across the deck and off the far edge into the sea before it could ever slow down on its own. The ship needs a way to seize the aircraft the instant it lands, and halt it almost at once, and the way it does so is both simple and ingenious. Stretched across the angled landing deck are a small number of steel cables, lying just above the surface, spaced a little apart. These are the arresting wires, and hanging down from the tail of every aircraft built to land on a carrier is a strong metal hook, called the tail hook. As the aircraft comes down onto the deck, the pilot's aim is for that hook to catch one of the steel wires stretched across their path. The moment the hook snags a wire, the wire begins to pull the aircraft to a stop, and it does so with extraordinary strength, because each wire is connected below deck to powerful machinery designed to absorb the enormous energy of a landing jet. The result is astonishing to witness. An aircraft weighing many tons, traveling at highway speed, is brought from that full speed to a dead stop in only about 2 seconds, in a distance of just a few hundred feet. One instant, it is racing down the deck, and barely a heartbeat later, it is standing still, held fast by the wire, the whole violent energy of its landing drained away by the machinery below. It is a jolt of tremendous force, gentled and absorbed, so that the aircraft and its pilot come safely and instantly to rest where a moment before they were hurtling forward. Pilots often speak of the sudden, powerful tug of the wire catching hold, throwing them forward against their straps, and then the abrupt, welcome stillness of a safe landing. Guiding the pilot down to that precise spot is another clever piece of equipment, one with a charming name. Set beside the landing area is a system of lights, an optical landing aid that shows the pilot whether they are coming in at exactly the right height and angle to catch a wire. At its heart is a bright amber light that the pilots call the meatball, or simply the ball. If the aircraft is on the correct path, the ball appears lined up between rows of green reference lights. If the aircraft is too high or too low, the ball drifts up or down, warning the pilot to adjust. As they begin their approach, pilots famously report that they can see it by saying that they have the ball, and then they fly it down, keeping that glowing amber light steady and centered all the way to the deck. And because even the finest pilot may sometimes miss, the whole system has a gentle safety net built into it, which connects back to the clever angled deck. If a landing aircraft's hook fails to catch any of the wires, something that does happen from time to time, the pilot must not try to stop, for there is not enough deck left. Instead, and this is why they do something that seems strange, every pilot lands at full engine power, throttles pushed forward, ready to fly again in an instant. Should the hook miss every wire, the aircraft simply continues down the angled deck at full power and lifts off again over the open sea, climbing back into the sky to circle around and try once more. This missed landing has its own friendly name. The crew call it a bolter. It is not a failure or a danger, merely a second chance, offered freely by the wisdom built into the ship. There is deep reassurance in that layered care, and it is a fine thing to rest upon as the night deepens. Consider how many gentle safeguards surround each returning aircraft. The glowing ball to guide it down to exactly the right path, the wires waiting to catch it and bring it swiftly to a safe stop, and the angled deck and the full power landing, standing ready to give a second chance should the first attempt not take. Nothing is left to a single point of failure. Every landing is wrapped in backups and mercies, so that a pilot returning to the ship in darkness or rough weather is caught, again and again if need be, and brought safely home. So picture it now, softly. A jet descending out of the evening sky toward the small lit deck, the amber ball glowing steady before the pilot's eyes, the wheels touching, the hook reaching down, the wire catching hold, and the aircraft brought in an instant from rushing flight to perfect stillness, safe upon the deck, caught gently out of the sky and welcomed home. In the next chapter, we will meet the people who make all of this possible, the deck crews in their colored jerseys, and the beautiful working rainbow they form upon the steel. Now let us meet the people who make all of this possible, the crews who work upon that great steel deck. And the first thing you would notice, if you could stand among them during flight operations, is that they are dressed in bright colors, each person wearing a jersey of yellow or purple or green or red, so that the whole deck becomes a kind of living rainbow. There is a very good reason for this, and it is a beautiful example of solving a hard problem simply. The flight deck during operations is one of the most demanding workplaces on Earth. Aircraft are moving, engines are roaring, steam is hissing from the catapults, and the noise is so overwhelming that ordinary speech is impossible. You could shout at the top of your lungs, and the person beside you would hear nothing. In that thunderous, fast-moving place, dozens of people must work together in perfect coordination, each doing their own vital task, and everyone must be able to tell, at a single glance, who around them does what. The answer the Navy found was color. Give each job its own color of jersey, and suddenly the entire deck can be read like a map, instantly, without a single word spoken. So each color carries a meaning, and once you know them, the busy deck resolves into clear and orderly sense. The sailors in yellow jerseys are the aircraft directors. They are the ones who guide the aircraft around the crowded deck, using clear hand signals to taxi each plane safely to where it needs to go. And it is a yellow shirt who gives a launching aircraft its final signal to go. The yellows run the movement of the aircraft, and they are often the most visible figures amid the action, arms raised, directing the great machines like conductors. The sailors in purple handle the fuel. They are affectionately nicknamed the grapes, for the color they wear, and their job is to refuel the aircraft, pumping fuel carefully into machines surrounded by heat and engines, a task requiring great care. The sailors in green look after the catapults and the arresting wires, the very machinery we have just explored, keeping those systems working and ready. Among the greens are the hook runners, who dash out to a freshly landed aircraft to make sure its tail hook is freed from the wire so the deck can be cleared for the next arrival. The sailors in red are near the most serious hazards. They handle the weapons and ordnance, and they also form the crash and salvage teams, the firefighters who stand ready to rush toward any emergency on the deck. Red is the color of caution, worn by those whose work sits closest to danger. The sailors in blue are the plane handlers, often the newest members of the deck crew. They drive the tractors that tow aircraft, operate the great elevators that lift planes between the hangar below and the deck above, and secure the parked aircraft with chocks and chains so they cannot roll. The sailors in brown are the plane captains, each responsible for the care and readiness of a particular aircraft, tending it like a devoted keeper, making sure it is clean and prepared before every flight. And the sailors in white are the watchers over safety, the medical personnel, the inspectors, and the landing signal officers who help guide the aircraft down. 7 colors then, each a silent language, spread across the deck. Yellow for the directors, purple for the fuel, green for the catapults and wires, red for ordnance and fire, blue for the handlers, brown for the plane captains, and white for safety. To an outsider, it might look merely festive, a scattering of bright shirts against grey steel. But to everyone working there, those colors are speech itself, telling each person exactly who everyone else is and what they are doing, keeping the whole intricate operation safe and clear in a place too loud for any other kind of talk. There is something quietly wonderful in that, and it is a restful thing to consider. Faced with a problem that seemed almost impossible, how to coordinate dozens of people doing dangerous work in a place where no one can hear a word, the answer was not some complicated machine, but simply color. a different colored shirt for each role, and at once the chaos becomes legible, everyone instantly known, everyone in their proper place. It is the same gentle cleverness we have seen again and again aboard this ship, a hard thing made simple by a single clear idea. And picture, too, how it must look from above, from the high windows of the island where the air boss keeps watch. The whole deck spread out below, and moving across it, all those points of bright color, yellows guiding, purples fueling, greens tending the wires, each shirt a small signal of purpose and order. A living, shifting rainbow, every hue in its right place. The entire complicated dance made readable at a glance. There is a deep calm in order like that, in seeing that even the busiest and most demanding work can be arranged into something clear and understandable and almost beautiful. So let that image of the colored deck settle over you now. All those bright jerseys moving with purpose across the steel, each one known, each one needed, all of them working together in silent, colorful harmony. In the next chapter, we will watch those colors move and see how all these people, in all their different shirts, come together in the extraordinary, carefully practiced dance that is a day of flight operations at sea. Now watch those colors begin to move. When a carrier launches and recovers aircraft, all those brightly dressed sailors come together in a performance so intricate and so precisely timed that people who study it often call the flight deck the most carefully organized few acres anywhere on Earth. Imagine the scene at the height of flight operations. Aircraft are being readied, fueled, and armed. Others are taxiing toward the catapults to be flung into the sky, while still others are descending to catch the wires and land. Engines howl, the deck trembles, steam rises in white clouds, and the wind rushes across the open steel. To an untrained eye, it would look like pure pandemonium, a terrifying tangle of moving machines and running people in the midst of deafening noise. And yet, it is not chaos at all. It is one of the most disciplined and rehearsed operations human beings have ever devised. Every movement planned, every person knowing exactly where to be and what to do. Because no one can hear a word over the roar, the entire performance is conducted almost silently, through gesture and signal. The yellow-shirted directors guide the aircraft with clear, deliberate movements of their arms and hands, a whole language of motion understood by every pilot and every crew member. A hand raised, an arm swept to the side, fingers pointed, and a 50,000-pound aircraft turns and moves exactly as bid. The pilots watch these signals and obey them precisely, trusting the person on the deck to guide them safely through the crowded space. It is a conversation carried out entirely in movement, a silent dialogue between the people on the deck and the machines they shepherd. Every role we met in the last chapter now takes its place in the dance. The blue shirts position the aircraft and pull away the chocks. The purple shirts finish the fueling and withdraw their hoses. The green shirts stand ready at the catapults and the wires. The red shirts watch over the weapons and stand poised for any emergency. The white shirts keep their careful watch on safety over everything. And the yellow shirts orchestrate it all, moving each aircraft in turn to its place, timing every launch and every recovery so that they flow together without collision or delay. High above, in the island, the air boss oversees the whole performance, holding the rhythm of it all in mind at once. What makes it truly remarkable is the speed and the tightness of the timing. On a busy deck, aircraft can be launched and recovered only moments apart. One flung off the bow while another settles onto the angled deck behind. The two events choreograph to happen almost together in the same small space. There is no room for hesitation or confusion. Each step must follow the last in smooth, unbroken sequence, like the movements of a dance that has been practiced so many thousands of times that it has become second nature. And that is exactly what it is. The people on that deck have rehearsed their parts until they can perform them almost without thought, each person flowing into the next action as naturally as breathing, so that the whole intricate operation unfolds with a grace that belies its danger and its noise. People who have watched it often reach for the language of art to describe it. They call it a ballet, a dance, a symphony of motion, because for all its power and hazard, there is a real beauty in the way it all comes together. Dozens of people and machines, moving in tight coordination across a few acres of steel in the middle of the ocean, each playing their part flawlessly, the whole forming a single, smooth and continuous flow. It is teamwork raised to the level of an art form, order and precision drawn out of what should by rights be overwhelming confusion. And beneath the intensity of it lies a deep and steadying calm, the calm of people who know their work completely. The sailors on that deck are not panicking or scrambling. They are focused, practiced, sure of themselves and of each other. Each one trusts the others to do their part, and that mutual trust is what turns the roaring chaos into orderly motion. There is a profound peace in watching people who are truly masters of what they do, moving with quiet confidence through work that would frighten anyone else. It is the calm at the center of the storm, the stillness inside the whirlwind. There is a gentle lesson in that, worth resting upon as the night deepens. Even the most overwhelming seeming situations can be met with grace when they are approached with preparation, clear roles, and trust in one another. What looks like impossible chaos from the outside is, from within, simply many people, each calmly doing their known part, together. Order does not have to mean the absence of intensity. It can live right in the heart of it. So picture that beautiful dance now, softly, as you settle. The bright colors moving across the deck in their practiced patterns. The silent language of signaling hands. The aircraft flowing on and off the ship in smooth succession. Everyone sure and calm and exactly where they belong. A performance of extraordinary skill, unfolding on a few acres of steel, adrift on the endless sea, beautiful in its order and its grace. In the next chapter, we will leave the busy deck behind and go below, into the quieter world within the ship, to discover the surprising little town that fills its many decks, complete with shops, a chapel, a barber shop, and even a hospital. Leave the busy deck behind now and go below, down into the quieter world within the ship, and you will find something that surprises almost everyone who learns of it. Sealed inside the many decks of the carrier is a complete little town, with nearly all the shops and services any town on land would have. We touched on this at the very beginning of our night together, but it is worth walking through properly, because the completeness of it is truly remarkable. A floating city of 5,000 people, cut off from land for months at a time, cannot send anyone out for the things they need. Everything must be aboard. And so, over the decks of the ship, the Navy has built, in miniature, almost every service a community requires, tucked into whatever spaces can be found among the machinery and the passageways. Consider the mail. 5,000 people, far from home, need letters and parcels from their families, and they need to send their own letters back. So the ship has its own post office, staffed by sailors who sort and handle the enormous flow of mail that comes and goes whenever the ship can receive it. And because it functions as a genuine post office, serving a genuine community, the carrier is assigned its own postal code, just like any town, so that a letter addressed to a sailor aboard can find its way across the world and out to the ship at sea. A piece of mail can travel from a small town anywhere on land, across oceans, and arrive in the hands of someone standing on a ship hundreds of miles from shore. That quiet thread of connection to home means a great deal to the people aboard. Then there is the matter of health. With thousands of people living and working aboard, some will inevitably fall ill or be injured, and there is no hospital to drive them to. So the ship carries its own. A carrier has a full medical department, with a genuine hospital inside it, complete with hospital beds, operating rooms where surgery can be performed, and the equipment to handle serious emergencies far out at sea. There are doctors and nurses and medical technicians aboard, and there are dentists too, with dental chairs and drills, ready to ease an aching tooth. Whatever befalls the crew, from a minor complaint to a true emergency, can be cared for within the ship itself by skilled people who are always aboard. And beyond mail and medicine, there are all the smaller comforts that make a place feel like home. The ship has a store where sailors can buy snacks, toiletries, and small necessities, a little shop at sea. It has a barber shop where the crew can get their hair cut. It has a chapel, a quiet space set aside for worship and reflection, where services are held for sailors of many different faiths, a still and peaceful room amid all the activity. It has gyms with weights and equipment so the crew can exercise and stay strong. It has a library of books to borrow. Some carriers even have their own television and radio broadcasts produced aboard, so the crew can watch and listen to programming made right there on the ship. Stack all of this together, layer upon layer through the decks, and you have a genuine town. A post office and a hospital, a dentist and a barber shop, a store, a chapel, a gym, a library. Streets of passageways connecting them all. Everything a community of thousands needs to live, not just to survive, but to be reasonably comfortable and cared for, all sealed within a single hull and carried across the sea. It is a town that happens to float and to move and to be made entirely of steel, but a town nonetheless, complete and self-contained. There is deep comfort in that completeness, and it is a lovely thing to rest your mind upon. The people aboard are far from home, cut off from the ordinary world, and yet they lack for very little. If they need a haircut, there is a barber. If they fall ill, there is a doctor. If their heart is heavy, there is a quiet chapel to sit in. If they long for home, there is a post office bringing letters across the sea. Every ordinary human need has been thought of and provided for, so that even in the middle of the vast and empty ocean, life can go on in a way that is familiar and whole. Nothing essential has been left behind. Imagine how reassuring it must be to live inside such a place. To know that whatever you might need is somewhere aboard, that you are held within a complete and caring community, even as you sail across the loneliest waters in the world. It is the security of a well-provisioned home, multiplied into a floating city, wrapped around every soul aboard. So let that sense of completeness settle over you now. A whole small town, sealed warm and safe inside a great ship, with all its shops and services glowing quietly through the decks. A post office, a hospital, a chapel, a store. All the comforts of home carried faithfully across the sea, so that the people aboard want for nothing as they sail through the night. In the next chapter, we will visit one of the most important and comforting parts of that floating town, the galleys where its thousands of people are fed, and the bakers who work quietly through the night so the crew can wake to fresh bread. Of all the services that keep the floating city alive, none is more constant or more comforting than the feeding of its people. Somewhere in the ship, at every hour of the day and night, food is being prepared, because a town of 5,000 is always hungry, and the galleys almost never rest. The scale of the task is difficult to imagine. Think of how much food a single family goes through in a day, and then multiply that by thousands. A modern carrier serves an enormous number of meals every single day. a figure often cited at around 18,000. 18,000 meals, prepared and served aboard one ship, day after day after day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and more, cooked in great quantities and offered to a constant stream of hungry sailors coming off watch or heading on to one. The kitchens aboard, which the Navy calls galleys, are more like the kitchens of a large institution than of a home. Vast spaces, full of enormous pots and ovens and griddles, where cooks labor to turn mountains of ingredients into hot meals for the crew. And it never truly stops, because the ship itself never truly stops. A carrier operates around the clock. While some of the crew work through the day, others work through the night, and still others sleep. And then they trade places, so that at every hour there are people coming off duty, tired and hungry, needing to be fed. The galleys must therefore keep serving almost continuously, offering meals not just at the usual 3 times a day, but through the small hours as well, so that a sailor, finishing a watch at 3 in the morning, can still find something warm to eat. The rhythm of meals aboard follows the endless rhythm of the ship's work, flowing on through day and night without pause. To feed so many so constantly requires a small army of cooks, and they are among the hardest working people aboard. They rise early and stay late, or they work straight through the night, preparing food in quantities that would daunt anyone. It is demanding, sweaty, unglamorous labor, carried out in hot kitchens deep in the ship, far from the excitement of the flight deck. And yet it is absolutely essential, for an army, as the old saying goes, marches on its stomach, and a ship's crew is only as strong and steady as the meals that sustain them. The cooks feed the whole floating city, and in doing so, they keep it running. There is one group among them whose work is especially quiet and especially lovely, and that is the bakers. While most of the ship sleeps, the bakers are awake, working through the darkest hours of the night. They mix and knead and shape their dough, and they tend the ovens, so that by the time the crew begins to stir in the morning, there is fresh bread ready, still warm, its smell drifting through the nearby passageways. Fresh rolls, loaves, and pastries, made from scratch in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the night, so that thousands of people can begin their day with the simple, ancient comfort of warm bread. There is something deeply tender in that image, of the bakers laboring quietly in the night, while everyone else rests, purely so that others can wake to something good. And the places where all this food is eaten, the mess decks, are among the most important spaces on the ship, for reasons that go beyond nourishment. They are where the crew gathers. In a life of hard work and long hours, the meal is a pause, a chance to sit down, to rest for a few minutes, to talk and laugh with shipmates. The mess deck is the ship's gathering place, its town square, where friendships are built and news is shared, and the community comes together 3 times a day and more. The food fills the belly, but the gathering fills something else, the human need for company and warmth, especially far from home. There is a great deal of comfort in all of this, and it is a fine thing to rest upon as the night grows late. Wherever you are in the world, however far from land, if you are aboard that ship, there is always a hot meal waiting for you, always someone cooking, always the possibility of sitting down with friends over food. The most basic and ancient of comforts, a warm meal shared in good company, is faithfully provided at every hour, so that no one aboard the great ship ever goes hungry or eats alone. It is care made edible, kindness served on a tray. So picture it now, in the quiet of your mind. Deep in the ship, the galleys glowing warm and busy, cooks tending their great pots, the smell of good food in the air, and in the darkest part of the night, the bakers quietly at their ovens, shaping tomorrow's bread, while the city sleeps, so that the crew will wake to warmth and comfort. All those thousands of people, fed and cared for, gathered at their tables, sustained through every hour by the steady, loving work of the galleys. Let the warmth of that settle over you, the warmth of a kitchen, of fresh bread, of a meal shared among friends. In the next chapter, we will follow the crew from the table to their beds and discover where thousands of people lay down to sleep each night, rocked gently by the sea inside their floating home. Follow the crew now from the warm mess decks to their beds, for after every meal and every watch comes the need that binds all of us together, the need for sleep. And the way thousands of people rest each night aboard a moving ship is one of the most quietly soothing parts of its whole story. The sleeping areas aboard are called berthing compartments, and they are ingeniously arranged to fit as many people as possible into the ship's precious space. There are no bedrooms as we know them on land, no private chambers with a door to close. Instead, the crew sleep in bunks, and because room is so scarce, the bunks are stacked one above another, often 3 high, in long rows filling each compartment. These stacked bunks have a name of their own. The sailors call them racks. Each person is assigned a rack, and that narrow bunk, along with a small locker for their belongings, becomes their own private corner of the vast ship, the one small space in all that steel that belongs to them alone. A rack is a modest thing, but it is made as comfortable and as private as the tight space allows, and there is a real coziness to it. Each bunk has a curtain that can be drawn across it, closing off the sleeper from the light and bustle of the compartment, creating a tiny, snug enclosure just big enough for one person to lie down and rest. Many have a small reading light and a little space to tuck away a book, a photograph from home, a few small comforts. When a weary sailor climbs into their rack at the end of a long shift and draws the curtain closed, they enter a small private world of their own, a warm little nest carved out of the enormous ship, where they can finally be alone with their thoughts and let sleep come. Because the ship works around the clock, its people do not all sleep at the same time. As some rise to take up their duties, others are lying down to rest, trading places in an endless rhythm that follows the ship's ceaseless work. And so, at any hour of the day or night, in berthing compartments throughout the ship, there are always people sleeping, curtains drawn, resting quietly while the great vessel carries them onward. The ship never fully sleeps and never fully wakes. It simply flows on through its rhythms, always partly at rest, always partly at work. Thousands of small private slumbers unfolding within it at every moment. And here is the loveliest part of all, the part most likely to help you toward your own sleep tonight. All through the ship, always, there is a sound. A deep, steady, gentle hum, the sound of the great vessel alive and moving. It is the low murmur of the engines far below, the soft rush of air through the ventilation, the faint and constant vibration of 100,000 tons of ship pushing steadily through the sea. It is never loud, never jarring, just a low and endless background hum that fills every space aboard, felt as much as heard, a soft trembling in the very steel around you. And to the people who live there, this hum becomes the most soothing sound in the world, the sound of home, the sound that means all is well and the ship is carrying them safely on. Sailors often say that they sleep better aboard than they do on land, lulled by that constant gentle hum and by the soft, slow motion of the ship upon the swells. The vessel rocks them, ever so slightly, the way a cradle rocks a child, the deep ocean beneath rising and falling in long, slow breaths that pass up through the hull and into their racks. Wrapped in that sound and that motion, curtain drawn, snug in their small private bunk, thousands of tired people let go each night and sink into deep and restful sleep, held by the ship as securely as a child is held in loving arms. There is such peace in that image, and it is exactly the peace we have been moving toward all this long night. Picture them now, all those sleeping sailors, tucked into their racks throughout the ship, curtains drawn, small lights switched off, each in their own snug corner of the floating city. The gentle hum surrounding them, the slow rocking of the sea beneath them, the tireless heart beating steadily far below, and the watch being kept faithfully up in the island, so that every one of them can rest without a care. Thousands of people, resting all at once, safe inside their great steel home as it carries them softly across the dark and rolling ocean. And you can let yourself sink into that same rest now. Imagine yourself in one of those small, warm racks, the curtain drawn against the world, the deep hum of the ship all around you, the slow motion of the sea rocking you gently. There is nothing to do and nowhere to be. The ship is carrying you. The watch is being kept. The heart is beating steadily below. You are held and safe and free at last to let go and sleep. In the next chapter, we will think about the people themselves, the thousands of individuals who make up this floating city, many of them surprisingly young, and the close community they form together far from home. We have spoken a great deal about the ship itself, its steel and its machinery and its clever systems. But a carrier is not truly its metal, it is its people, and the thousands of individuals who bring the floating city to life are, in many ways, the most remarkable thing about it of all. There are more than 5,000 of them aboard a modern carrier, and the first thing that surprises many people is how young so many of them are. This is not a ship crewed only by grey-haired veterans. A great many of the sailors are young men and women in their late teens and early 20s, some of them not long out of school, away from home for the first time in their lives. They come from towns and cities all over their country, from farms and suburbs and busy streets, drawn together onto this one ship in the middle of the ocean. Picture that. Thousands of young people, most of them barely more than beginning their adult lives, running one of the most complex machines ever built, keeping it alive and working every hour of every day. There is something quietly moving in that, in how much responsibility rests on such young shoulders, and how well they carry it. And every single one of them matters, for the ship cannot run without all of its people. We tend to think first of the pilots and of the officers on the bridge, but they are only a small part of the whole. It takes thousands of others to keep the floating city alive. There are the technicians who tend the reactors deep below, and the cooks who feed everyone, and the mechanics who repair the aircraft. There are the sailors who handle the mail, and the medical staff in the hospital, and the crews who work the deck in their colored jerseys. There are the people who make the fresh water, who run the store, who cut hair, who keep the ship clean, who do 1,000 different jobs both grand and humble. From the most senior officer to the youngest sailor mopping a passageway, each has a role, and each role keeps some vital part of the whole in motion. Remove any group, and the city would falter. What forms among all these people, living and working so closely together, so far from home, is something special, and it is perhaps the warmest part of the entire story. They become a community, a family of a kind. When you eat every meal with the same people, sleep in the same compartment, work the same long hours side by side, and share the same distance from everyone you love back home, powerful bonds form between you. The sailors call one another shipmates, and the word carries real weight. A shipmate is someone who is in it with you, who understands what this strange life at sea is like, because they are living it too, who will look out for you when you are struggling, and whom you will look out for in turn. Far out on the lonely ocean, cut off from home, the crew become one another's family, one another's support, one another's comfort. And they need that, because life aboard is hard, and the separation from home is real. These are people who miss their parents, their partners, their children, their friends. They miss birthdays and holidays and ordinary evenings at home. They go months without seeing the faces they love most, connected only by letters and the occasional message across the vast distance. It is not an easy life, and it asks a great deal of them, but they carry it together, leaning on one another, finding warmth and laughter and friendship even in the middle of the empty sea, and that shared endurance binds them together in ways that often last for the rest of their lives. There is deep tenderness in remembering this, and it is a good and human thing to rest upon as the night grows late. For all the marvels of engineering we have explored, the catapults and the reactors and the clever angled deck, the true heart of the ship is not made of steel at all. It is made of people, thousands of ordinary human beings, many of them very young, far from everyone they love, working together and caring for one another, keeping the great vessel and each other alive through the long months at sea. Every impressive fact about the ship rests, in the end, upon their patient and loyal shoulders. So think of them now, with warmth, as you settle deeper towards sleep. All those thousands of people, each with a home somewhere and a family who loves them, gathered onto this one ship far out on the dark water, working and resting and looking after one another, missing home and making a new home together. Young and old, in every kind of role, each one needed, each one part of something far larger than themselves. The true and beating heart of the floating city, made not of metal, but of human kindness and courage. Let that warmth stay with you, the warmth of people caring for one another in a far and lonely place. In the next chapter, we will pull back and see that this great ship, for all its size and all its thousands of souls, is rarely truly alone upon the sea, for it travels always in the quiet company of other ships gliding alongside it through the ocean night. Pull back now and rise in your imagination high above the ship, high enough to see the wider ocean spread out all around it, and you will notice something you might not have expected. The great carrier is not alone out there. Gliding across the water alongside it, spread out in a wide and orderly formation, are other ships, keeping it quiet company as it sails. A carrier almost never travels by itself. For all its size and strength, it rarely ventures out onto the ocean alone. Instead, it moves at the center of a group of ships that travel together as one, a formation the Navy calls a strike group. The carrier is the heart of this group, the great vessel around which all the others are arranged, and the other ships gather about it as it crosses the sea, each with its own role, all of them moving in concert like a single living thing spread across the water. Picture the arrangement from above. In the middle sails the carrier, vast and central, and around it, at various distances, glide its companions. There are sleek warships called cruisers and destroyers, smaller and faster than the carrier, positioned around it like watchful guardians, their radars sweeping the sky and the sea, ready to shield the great ship from any threat. Somewhere beneath the surface, unseen, a submarine may travel with the group as well, gliding silently through the deep, another quiet protector moving along with the rest. And there are supply ships too, vessels that carry extra food, fuel for the aircraft, and other stores, sailing with the group so that it can be replenished far from any port. Together, all these ships form a single traveling community upon the ocean, the carrier and its escorts moving as one. There is a beautiful coordination to how they sail. The ships hold their positions relative to one another, keeping careful formation across many miles of sea, all steering the same course, all matching their speed to the group, communicating constantly so that they move together in smooth harmony. When the formation turns, the ships turn together. When it changes speed, they adjust together. Across the wide expanse of the ocean, this handful of vessels behaves almost like a single organism, a scattered but unified body sliding across the water in quiet cooperation. It calls to mind the way a pod of whales travels together through the deep, or a flock of birds moves as one across the sky, each individual keeping its place within the greater whole, all bound by an invisible sense of togetherness. And this togetherness means that the carrier and everyone aboard it is never truly alone out on the vast and empty sea. However far from land the group may sail, however lonely the surrounding ocean, there are always these companionships nearby, sharing the same waters, holding the same watch, moving through the same night. Each ship can see the others, on radar if not by eye, and knows that it is part of a group, not a solitary speck lost upon the endless water. There is a profound reassurance in that, in knowing that you travel in company, that others are close by, that if anything were needed, there are friends near at hand upon the sea. For the people aboard the carrier, there is comfort in glancing out and seeing the shape of an escort ship on the horizon, a reminder that they are not alone, that they journey together with others who share their purpose and their path. And for all the ships of the group, there is strength in numbers, in the knowledge that they watch over one another, each protecting the others, the whole formation far safer together than any single ship would be alone. They are, in a sense, one large community spread across the water, thousands of people on many ships, all moving through the ocean night as a single traveling family. There is a gentle truth in that, worth resting upon as the night deepens. We are so rarely meant to journey through anything entirely alone. Even the mightiest ship, strong enough to cross any ocean by itself, chooses instead to travel in company, surrounded by others who share its way. There is safety in that, and there is comfort in it. The simple comfort of not being alone, of having others near as you move through the dark. It is a truth as old as humanity and as wide as the sea. So picture it now as you sink further toward rest. The great carrier at the center, and all around it, spread across the moonlit water, its faithful companionships, gliding along in quiet formation. Cruisers and destroyers keeping their patient watch. A submarine somewhere in the depths below supply ships bearing everything the group might need, all of them moving together as one across the endless ocean. No ship alone, no one alone. A whole community of vessels journeying side by side through the peaceful night, watching over one another, keeping company across the deep. In the next chapter, we will turn our gaze outward, past the ships, to the immense ocean that surrounds them on every side, and to the deep and ancient beauty of the open sea at night, with its vast horizons and its brilliant, uncountable stars. Turn your gaze outward now, past the ship and its companions, to the ocean itself, and to the deep and ancient beauty that surrounds the floating city on every side. For beyond all the steel and the machinery lies something far older and far vaster, the open sea at night, and there is no more peaceful place in all the world. Out where the carrier sails, far from any land, the ocean stretches away in every direction to a horizon that is perfectly, cleanly round. There is nothing to break it, no hills, no buildings, no shore, only the meeting of dark water and darker sky, curving away on all sides. By day, the sea is an endless expanse of blue and grey, rising and falling in long, slow swells, going on and on beyond sight. But it is at night that the open ocean reveals its greatest wonders, and the people who keep the night, watchers aboard the ship, are among the few who ever truly see them. Consider the stars. On land, almost everywhere that people live, the glow of streetlights and cities washes the night sky pale, and only a scattering of the brightest stars can be seen. But far out at sea, there are no lights for hundreds of miles, no glow on the horizon, nothing to dim the heavens at all. And so the night sky above the ocean blazes with a brilliance that most people never witness in their whole lives. Countless stars crowd the darkness, far more than can be seen from any town, And among them, the great pale river of the Milky Way stretches across the sky in a band of soft light, our own galaxy revealed in its full glory. A sailor standing watch on a clear night, far from land, looks up into a sky so thick with stars that it can take the breath away, the whole dome of the heavens ablaze from edge to edge. And it is not only the sky that glows. The sea itself, on certain nights, holds its own quiet light. In the ocean live countless tiny living things, so small as to be invisible one by one, that give off a soft blue-green glow when the water around them is disturbed. As the great ship moves through the sea, its passage stirs these tiny creatures, and its wake can come alive with a faint, ghostly light, a trail of cool blue-green glimmering in the black water behind the ship. Sailors have marveled at this, for as long as ships have sailed, the sea itself seeming to shine, the ship leaving a glowing path across the dark ocean as though trailing starlight through the water. Above, the stars, below, the glowing sea, and the ship moving quietly between the two through a night lit by both heaven and ocean. There is a stillness out there that is difficult to find anywhere on land. Far from the noise and rush of the world, surrounded by nothing but water and sky, the open sea holds a silence and a peace as old as the planet itself. The slow rise and fall of the swells, the soft sound of water moving along the hull, the wide, patient breathing of the ocean, which has risen and fallen this way for countless ages, long before any ship sailed upon it and long after all of them are gone. To stand at the edge of the deck on a quiet night, gazing out at that vast dark water under those brilliant stars, is to feel very small and, somehow, very much at peace, held within something far greater and far older than oneself. There is deep rest to be found in that feeling, and it is exactly where we have been journeying all this long night. The open ocean at night asks nothing of us. It simply is, immense and calm and beautiful, indifferent to all our small worries, offering in its vastness a strange and profound comfort. Our troubles seem to shrink beside so great a thing. The endless water, the blazing stars, the glowing wake, the slow eternal breathing of the sea, all of it hushes the busy mind and draws it gently toward stillness, toward the quiet that lies beneath all our thoughts. So let yourself go out there now, in your imagination, and simply rest in it. Stand at the quiet edge of the great ship on a clear and peaceful night. Feel the soft sea air. Look up at the countless stars crowding the dark sky, the Milky Way spilling across the heavens. Look down at the faint blue-green glow shimmering in the water below. Feel the slow, gentle rise and fall of the swells, the ancient breathing of the sea. There is nothing out here but beauty and peace and vastness, and you are held within it, small and safe and calm, as the great ship carries you softly onward through the glowing, star-filled night. Breathe slowly. Let the ocean's ancient calm fill you. There is nothing to do but rest here, beneath the stars, upon the peaceful sea. In the next chapter, the second to last of our long night together, we will follow the great ship as it finally turns toward home, after its long months at sea, and eases at last back toward the shore and the families waiting there. After months upon the endless ocean, there comes at last the day every sailor has been quietly longing for. The great ship turns toward home, and the slow return to shore, after so long away, is one of the most tender and joyful moments in the whole life of the floating city. A carrier's journey at sea is a long one. These ships and their crews often stay away for many months at a time, sailing distant waters far from their home port, living the whole life we have explored tonight, day after day, week after week, for the better part of a year. Through all that time, the people aboard carry home in their hearts thinking of the families and friends and familiar places they left behind, counting quietly toward the day they will see them again. And then, finally, that day begins to approach. The long deployment nears its end. The ship sets its course for home, and every heart aboard lifts at the thought. As the ship draws near its home port, a wonderful anticipation builds throughout the floating city. After so long at sea, the crew prepare themselves and their ship to come home with pride. And on the morning of their return, many of the sailors do something that is both a tradition and a beautiful sight. They put on their finest dress uniforms and go up onto the flight deck, and they line the very edges of the ship, standing evenly spaced all around its perimeter, shoulder to shoulder, facing outward. This old custom is called manning the rails, and it turns the returning ship into a moving picture of honor and homecoming, its crew arrayed proudly around its edges as it glides in from the sea. Imagine the sight of it, the great vessel approaching the shore with hundreds of sailors standing at its rails in their crisp uniforms, coming home at last. And on the shore, the families are waiting. Long before the ship appears, they gather at the pier, husbands and wives, parents and children, sweethearts and friends, all of them straining their eyes toward the horizon for the first glimpse of the ship that carries the person they love. They bring banners and signs, homemade and heartfelt, painted with names and welcomes and messages of love. Children hold up drawings for parents who have been gone so long that the little ones have grown and changed in their absence. The whole pier fills with a crowd of longing and excitement, everyone watching, everyone waiting, hearts pounding as the great grey shape at last slides into view and grows slowly larger, coming home. Then comes the slow and careful work of bringing the enormous ship to the pier. A vessel so vast cannot simply pull up to the shore. It must be eased in with great patience, inching toward its berth, guided gently by small, powerful boats called tugs that nudge it into place. For the waiting families and for the sailors lining the rails, these final minutes stretch out almost unbearably. So close now, the two sides able to see one another at last, to pick out a beloved face in the crowd, and yet still held apart by those last few yards of water and those last slow minutes of maneuvering. Hands wave, names are called, tears begin to fall on both sides, and then, at last, the ship is secure, the gangways are lowered, and the long separation ends. The sailors come down off the ship and into the arms of the people who have waited so long for them. There are embraces held tight and long, and happy tears, and laughter, and children lifted high into the air. Parents meet babies who were born while they were away. Couples are reunited after months apart. The whole pier becomes a sea of joyful reunions, of families made whole again, of love that endured the long distance, and now, finally, needs no more waiting. After all the months at sea, all the watches kept, all the miles sailed, the people of the floating city are home. There is such warmth and such joy in that homecoming, and it is a beautiful thing to rest your heart upon as our night draws toward its close. Everything the crew endured, all the hard work and the long separation and the loneliness of the empty ocean, finds its reward here, in this moment of return, in the arms of the people they love. The long journey has a happy ending. The sailors come home, and there is a deep and simple comfort in that, in the knowledge that even the longest voyage eventually turns toward home, that those who go away come back again, that love waits faithfully on the shore and is answered at last with a joyful reunion. So picture that homecoming now, softly, as you settle deeper. The great ship easing gently toward the pier in the morning light, its sailors lined proudly along the rails, the families waiting below with their banners and their hopeful faces, and then the joyful meeting, the long embraces, the happy tears, the floating city's people, finally safely home, gathered back into the arms of everyone who loves them. A long journey ended, a safe and joyful return. In the final chapter, we will watch the great ship come fully to rest at last, its long voyage over, and let ourselves, gently, come to rest along with it. And so we come to the last and quietest part of our long night together. The great ship's voyage is over. It has come home from the sea, and now, at last, it rests. And as it settles into stillness, we can let ourselves settle too. Picture the ship now, home at last, secured safely at its pier, or lying quietly at anchor in a calm and sheltered harbor. The long months at sea are behind it. The endless watches are stood down. The great engines that drove it faithfully across the oceans have eased into quiet, their tireless work paused for a while. The flight deck, once so full of roaring aircraft and rushing crews and all the colored motion of flight operations, lies empty now, and calm, a wide, still field of steel resting beneath the evening sky. The catapults are silent. The wires lie quiet across the deck. Everything that labored so hard for so long has come, gently, to rest. The floating city has grown peaceful. Its thousands of people, home from the sea, are with their families now, or resting easy in the knowledge that home is near. The passageways that once bustled with activity are hushed and dim. Here and there, a quiet watch is still kept, a few faithful souls minding the ship as she rests. But the great rhythm of the ship's working life has slowed to a soft and easy calm. The vessel that crossed the world, that made its own water and its own power, that launched aircraft into the sky and caught them again, that fed and sheltered 5,000 people through all the long months at sea, has done its work, and now it simply rests, still and quiet, upon the gentle water. Think back over everything we have wandered through this night. The daring first leap of a single pilot long ago, with his wooden ramp and his sandbags and ropes. The slow growth of the idea, decade by decade, into the mighty ships of today. The vast mountain of steel, longer than 3 football fields, with its field of a deck riding upon the waves. The tireless heart beating in its depths, and the fresh water drawn from the endless sea. The clever angled deck, the great slingshot of the catapult, the wires that catch a falling jet out of the sky, the rainbow of the deck crews, and their beautiful, practiced dance. The whole floating town below, with its post office and its hospital and its chapel, its galleys and its warm, fresh bread. The thousands of sleeping sailors in their snug little racks, rocked by the sea and lulled by the ship's deep hum. The companion ships gliding alongside through the night, and the vast, star-filled ocean all around, and the joyful homecoming at the journey's end. All of it, every marvel and every comfort, gathered into this one great ship, now resting quietly at the end of its long voyage. There is a deep and complete peace in that, the peace of work well done, of a journey safely finished, of a great and busy thing finally come to rest. Everything that needed doing has been done. Everyone has been carried safely home, and now there is nothing left but stillness and quiet and rest. So let that peace settle fully over you now, as our night together comes to its close. The great ship is at rest, its engines quiet, its deck calm and empty beneath the stars, its people home and safe. And you, wherever you are, can rest now too, just as completely. Like the ship at the end of its long voyage, you have carried yourself through all the miles of your day, and now it is time, at last, to come to stillness. There is nothing more to do tonight. Nowhere left to sail, no more watches to keep. The journey is over, and rest has come. Let your body grow heavy and calm, like the great ship settling into quiet water. Let your breathing slow and deepen, soft and steady as the gentle swells of a sheltered harbor. Let every thought that troubled you today ease away into the darkness, the way the roar of the deck fades into the peaceful silence of a ship at anchor. You are safe, your work is done, the watch is being kept, and you are free, now, simply to let go and to rest. Somewhere tonight, out on the quiet water, a great ship lies still beneath the stars, its long voyage over, its thousands of souls at peace. The heart that never tires beats softly in its depths, the stars blaze overhead, the sea breathes slow and calm all around, and the floating city rests, complete and safe and still, as all things do at the end of their journey. Rest now, as the ship rests. Sink gently into the quiet, as the ship sinks into the calm harbor water, and let the deep and peaceful stillness of the sleeping sea carry you, softly and surely, all the way down into sleep. My dear sleep science lovers, could you please say in the comments where you're watching from right now? Also, good news. Simple Sleepy Science episodes are now available for free on Spotify. Use the link in the description or on the channel profile to enjoy our stories there.